Hello everyone, Unrested back again with another JFAQ, and today I'm going to be covering a subject that some of you might find a little bit disturbing or morbid, and that is the Japanese sogi or soshiki, which means funeral. Yes, even in Japan, of course, we have funerals, and although it's something a lot of us do not like to think about, death, it must happen, it must be done, and it does take place. The Japanese funeral is very different from the Western funeral, and today what I'm going to go ahead and do for you is break it up into stages, let you know about the Buddhist, the Shinto traditions that go behind it, the rituals, and give you a breakdown of what unfolds, probably some of the manners you should have, what you should expect, and maybe some facts that may surprise you. Come along and learn about the Japanese funeral. I'd like to start this JFAQ by first saying that the Japanese funeral is probably one of the most eye-opening and foreign experiences that I've ever had in Japan. Not just because of some of the obviously shocking and possibly morbid themes that go into any funeral anywhere, but just how much it differed from the Western funeral. And I want to start out by also saying that even though this country is considered a very secular, 80% atheist country, almost every funeral, and I'm talking nearly 99% of funerals, are extremely steeped in Buddhist and Shinto traditions. And that's what I'm going to pretty much teach you about today, and my own experience, and some of the manners and customs that I've learned from my own experience with funerals here in Japan. First off, it starts with the eldest son calling friends and family of the deceased to let them know what has happened, when the funeral will be arranged. He also must call a Buddhist priest or a Shinto priest, depending on religion, arrange a viewing, a funeral, and a burial at a temple or shrine, depending on the religion. And he also must contact a mortician in order to have the body prepared, which is the first step. Body preparation starts out with first cleaning the body, and next actually covering every orifice of the body with cotton. And this is in older tradition, which is believed to keep out the supernatural spirits, evil spirits that could possibly take over the body as it enters a spiritual realm. This, although perhaps is based in supernatural beliefs, today is still carried out and considered proper preparation for the body. Next step, and this can sometimes differ depending on Shintoism, Buddhism, or local belief, and by that it is putting the body into a coffin. To this day, the coffin is pretty rare because, number one, you're not buried in a coffin in Japan. The actual idea of burying a full body in a coffin is a very foreign idea and is almost never done, to the point that 99% of bodies are cremated in Japan. You can check out that fact if you want to. The body, though, is displayed for the viewing sometimes in a coffin, and always the body is put on top of dry ice for preservation. This allows the body to be preserved for quite a while. Embalming is not used. That's one thing that differs greatly from Western and Japanese practices. So there's no embalming, and as I said, there's going to be a lot of differences like that. So after preparation, 1 day later to 48 hours, depending, the viewing begins. The viewing is probably the closest to a Western tradition in the fact that you're expected to show up in all black. Women sometimes black kimonos. Men usually a black suit with a black tie and a white shirt. From there, the donations to give condolences to the grieving family are given upon entrance to the funeral. Now this amount differs as far as how close your relationship is to the family if you're a relative, or how close your relationship to the family is if you're a friend. Also, your rank in society can change the amount that you would give. As a rule of thumb, and don't exactly quote me on this, check with a good friend if you can, or check with a good family member if you can, if it's the polite thing to do, if you have those connections. But as a rule of thumb, anywhere from 3,000 yen to 30,000 yen is usually a traditional amount to give a grieving family. But everyone is expected to give some sort of donation to as a form of condolence to the family. So please be ready to do that if you're going to go to a funeral. At the viewing, usually you'll see some people arrive, hands clasped together with Buddhist beads over there. These beads are called the Juzu beads. These are pretty much prayer beads. That's the best way to translate that. After everyone is seated, the first part of the viewing commences, and this is commonly where a Buddhist priest, or sometimes Shinto priest, in front of the seated family and friends begins to chant a prayer which is called a sutra. This sutra commences, and then one by one family members and sometimes friends of the family come up and usually scatter incense. This incense is burned to help the transition of the body from the physical realm to the spiritual. And things can differ a little bit as far as Shintoism and Buddhism, as far as what their belief is. During the next part, we get into the actual funeral part of the traditions in the stages of burial. And during this part, a name for Buddhists is assigned to the deceased. Now, I know this might sound a little bit confusing. Yes, they already had a name in life, of course, but a new spiritual name is given to the deceased. And this spiritual name can actually gain them rank in the next realm, in the afterlife. At times, different levels of names get a different rank. Now, some people take this very seriously, and it's even a common practice to have some people purchase a better name for you to get a better rank in the afterlife. And I have seen this done. In the funeral I went to, I know they purchased quite an expensive name. Names can get very expensive, you'd be surprised. Other Japanese don't take this quite as seriously. One example, one very recent example, is a very famous comedian here, a Rakuten comedian here in Japan. He's elderly now, and unfortunately he has been diagnosed with terminal cancer. But as a final joke for all his fans, he chose his Buddhist name as Unko, the kanji Unko. And for those of you who might know Unko, that is actually like a little kid's word for poop, which I guess the guy must have a great sense of humor. It's I guess pretty brave to go into death with the name Unko. I don't know if I would recommend that. But like I said, some people take this very seriously, other Japanese maybe not so much. Now, don't have any kind of idea that a lower name would give you a rank so low as to place you in the Judeo-Christian hell or something like that. The religions and beliefs within Buddhism and Shintoism greatly differ from those in Judeo-Christian beliefs. So don't try to connect those or make any kind of link-ups. You'd be completely wrong. Okay, next part, the actual burial of the body. Now, this again differs quite a bit, because first the cremation takes place, and this was probably for me the most shocking experience, not because of what the Japanese partake in, but just because of my own experience with Western funerals. For them, this is quite normal. For me, it was just shocking due to my own practices. I was raised in a Catholic family, and obviously the Catholic funeral is very, very different from the Buddhist or Shinto one. But like I said, the cremation part was the most extreme for me because I always had the belief, I had never had any friends or family cremated, but I'd always had the belief that cremation made the body completely into unrecognizable ashes. And this was completely wrong. Now, perhaps the actual cremation of a body in America differs quite greatly from Japan. I wouldn't know because, like I said, I've never had any friends or family cremated. But in Japan, the body is cremated down to the point of bones. These bones are actually then pulled out of the cremation machine. I don't know what you'd call furnace. And the bones are then viewed by the closest family members. Not only are they then viewed, but then each person is given their own respectable urn, and the body is picked through with chopsticks. Okay, so this next part is going to cover two different sections, facts, surprising facts that I myself and probably you will find quite surprising about funerals and death in Japan. And the second part is manners associated with death in Japan. Now that might sound a little bit confusing, but I'll explain later and you'll understand why I included that. First of all, let me start with the first part is lifetime companies. As you may know, salarymen who work in Japan, usually when they take a job, it is a lifetime job. This is starting to become less and less common, but it still does happen, and there obviously is still people working now who will work their entire life for one company. Lifetime employment. Something started in the bubble era in Japan and is still held as a tradition at some companies, some very big corporations. These corporations sometimes hold entire plots for burial for company employees. And although that might not seem too surprising, one thing that might seem really surprising is that sometimes these plots actually represent the company. Now, of course, the person's name is put on there just like any other grave would have, but sometimes the gravestone itself is shaped as something associated with the company. For example, if you worked for an air transportation company, your grave might be shaped like an airplane. I'm not joking when I say this. One very famous company, you can look them up online, UCC Coffee, has coffee can shaped graves for their lifetime employees. This is in no way a plug for the company. It is respectable and it is considered an honor to have one of these. So don't think that this is something cheesy or used for marketing in Japan. This is in no way meant to do that. Next fact on the list is that sometimes ashes in Japan, the urn full of ashes, are stolen from graves of famous people and held for ransom. The surprising thing I found out about this was that a lot of these ransoms that have happened were to anime and manga artists. You can go ahead and check out some of those online. And finally, my last pretty amazing fact that I found out while researching this is that although, as I said, as of 2009, 99.81% of bodies are cremated and buried in urns in Japan, but there have been, and sometimes these are gaijin, who were full body coffin burial in Japan. But it is extremely rare, almost never done, and it can actually only be done in certain parts of Japan because a lot of actual wards and districts within prefectures ban body burial, and that's why you'll always see cremation. Next, let's move on to manners associated with death. These are some manners. Unfortunately, I myself have done some of these bad manners completely oblivious to the fact that these are associated with being rude about death. Now, of course, I was pardoned for the fact that nobody expected me to know this because I hadn't even been to my first Japanese funeral yet. Number one, and this is something you can accidentally do quite soon in Japan when you get here. Bowls of food are very small, they're very easy to move, and for the most part you're going to be moving them with your hands, grabbing stuff at the table, and as I said, sometimes in Japan a lot of restaurants have this tapas type setting where there's multiple dishes to eat that are small. You move them around, you trade, you eat different parts. Never, ever move one of these dishes with your chopsticks. The urn in which ashes are collected, bones and ashes are collected at a funeral, is moved only with the chopsticks. You don't move it with your hands. If you do this at the dinner table or at a meal, this is considered absolutely grotesque. Please do not do this. I have made this stupid mistake. Next is, and this one really surprised me, wearing your clothes inside out. I remember one time I was painting part of my house and not worrying or not caring too much about what the heck I was wearing or how I was wearing it. I wore a sweatshirt inside out, just thinking if I got paint on it, at least I could wear the other side. My wife asked me, "What, are you a dead body? Are you a dead person?" or something like that, she said in Japanese. And I didn't quite understand what she was getting at. And then I learned later that sometimes when the dead are cremated, their clothes are turned inside out. So to wear inside out clothes in public or even in your own house is considered really morbid. It'd be like enacting a very morbid act in your house or in public, which would be not so good. Finally, and this is something you who become teachers might find yourself doing, writing names in red pen. Not something you would expect being that big of a deal. Now, you may be asked at maybe an ALT job or an Akaiwa job or maybe even a Yochien kindergarten job to correct papers of your students, right? This is not something crazy. Obviously, students in Japan have worksheets just like students in America or any other Western country. You correct them, tell them what's wrong, and they learn from this. You can do your corrections in red pen just like you would do in a Western country, but do not write a person's name in red pen. If you remember earlier, I talked about the living person at a grave would cover their name in red paint. To write a person's name in red pen kind of symbolizes a funeral experience and is almost considered a bad omen or bad luck. So although you can go ahead and correct in a red pen, I highly advise you not to ever write a student's name in red pen. Stay away from that. Those are some amazing facts and manners that go along with death. I hope they allow you to orient yourself better when you get here to Japan. I also hope that some of this descriptions of the funeral practices and stages that I taught you about today will maybe help lessen the impact should you ever have to go to a funeral here, as I found, as I said, the first time I ever went to one, it was quite eye-opening and surprising. For further references, I suggest any of you to watch a highly recommended movie that became international film for Japan, I think 3 or 4 years ago. I'm sure you've heard of this one if you have any kind of interest in Japan. Okuribito, in English known as Departures, follows the story of no kansha. No kansha. Did I get that right? No kansha. Mortician. I don't really say mortician a lot in Japanese, so you can understand my worry about my pronunciation and if my word is even correct. No kansha. Mortician. The story is about morticians. You can watch. This movie is beautifully done and held in perfect Japanese tradition as far as the stages and rituals that go into the body, the preparation of the body, and having a lot of respect for the dead. It really teaches, I think, anybody internationally about how much respect we should have for the dead, how we should help those grieving in the process of moving the other person into the afterlife, etc., etc. My recommendation for you if you have more interest in this subject. As always, I am Unrested. This is JFAQ. If you have any questions, feel free to write. I'll see you next time.